During the darkest days of WCW, when the promotion was struggling, Daffney stood out as a highlight. She was known as the psycho girlfriend of David Flair and the manager of Crowbar. Her character was unique and memorable, breaking away from the typical portrayal of women in wrestling at the time. Daffney was one of the most intriguing figures in WCW in the company's final chapter. However, her career took a turn for the worse when she joined TNA. This is where she would suffer a series of injuries that would change her life forever. Shannon Spruill was born in 1975 into a military household, leading to a childhood spent in various places around the world, including in Germany and Oxford in England. From a young age, Shannon showed a fascination with the performing arts, and she even featured as a child actor in Santa Claus the Movie in 1985. She was a star soccer player throughout her childhood, and she also had a keen interest in pro wrestling. Her favourite wrestlers as a kid were the Junkyard Dog and George the Animal Steele. As a teenager, Shannon's family settled in Atlanta following her father's retirement from the Air Force. She followed her passion for acting by getting a degree in the subject from Georgia State University. Despite her commitment to the craft, she had trouble trying to break into the entertainment industry, but 1999 would be a big year for Shannon. She got married to Fozzy guitarist Rich Ward, and in November of that year she was approached for an audition by World Championship Wrestling. She travelled to Minneapolis to try out for the role of David Flair's mentally unhinged partner, and she secured that role on the spot. And while Shannon entered WCW at its weakest period, she was one of the best things about it. At the age of 24, Shannon appeared as Daffney for the first time during a Nitro Party segment as David Flair's girlfriend, and her ring debut came at Starrcade 1999, where she stopped David Flair from getting smacked with a crowbar. Soon after, the wrestler known as Crowbar joined forces with Daffney and David Flair, and they all shared a kind of weirdness with each other. While managing the duo on TV, Shannon herself began training at the power plant, where she was taught by Shane Helms, amongst others, how to wrestle. She was one of the very few women to ever graduate from the facility. Her character really started to take shape on TV with her iconic scream, and her unique voice at the time came about thanks to a recent tonsillectomy. The overall feel of the character was inspired by Mallory Knox from the movie Natural Born Killers. Daffney's involvement helped Flair and Crowbar win the WCW Tag Team titles, proving that she was a key player in the team. On house shows, she was tag teaming with David to take on the likes of Lane and Rave, but her first official TV match was against Miss Elizabeth on an episode of Nitro. Daffney and Crowbar became joint cruiserweight champions after defeating Chris Candido and Tammy Lynn Sitch. She managed to beat Crowbar to become the sole champion. However, she soon lost the title to Lieutenant Loco. Daffney was then caught up in a storyline affair between David Flair and Stacy Keibler, and this is where her acting ability really started to shine. You felt every part of Daffney's heartbreak during the storyline, and she made it really easy to feel sympathy for her. Even during nonsense like the wedding gown match from Bash at the Beach, she was still really the most entertaining thing in that entire segment. And in retrospect, Daffney was involved in a lot of nonsense. Her entire time in WCW was under the madness of Vince Russo, but somehow she managed to transcend that. Daffney was just a hugely memorable part of the final year of WCW's existence, despite the chaos going on as the ship was sinking. After WCW went under, Shannon focused on improving her wrestling skills on the independent circuit, and she made appearances in Ring of Honor where she became the valet to CM Punk and Colt Cabana. In July 2003, WWE offered her a developmental deal, and so she started working in Ohio Valley Wrestling. Chris Jericho knew her well due to her marriage to Rich Ward, his bandmate from Fozzy, and so he approached WWE management about bringing Shannon up to the main roster from developmental. Sadly, Jericho's request fell on deaf ears. Despite Jericho's efforts and Shannon's dedication, she was eventually released from her developmental contract. Also in 2003, Shannon divorced her husband and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. With all these changes in her life, she decided to quit the wrestling business. She wanted to give acting another try, and so she donated her wrestling boots to roommate Mickie James and took up a job as a personal trainer. She managed to stay away from the wrestling business for a year and a half, but she just couldn't resist getting back involved. In 2006, she returned to the business, wrestling for various indie promotions, and TNA was now emerging as America's #2 wrestling company. And in 2008, she became a regular member of the roster. In a terrible storyline, TNA had her appear as the Alaskan governor and vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin in a feud against the Beautiful People. The governor, as she was now known, made her TNA pay-per-view debut at Destination X in 2009 after a therapy session with TNA's resident shrink, Dr. Stevie. The governor transformed back into Daffney. By now it was clear how much she'd improved as an in-ring performer, and she was carrying some of her opponents in their matches. Daffney's sharpened in-ring skills didn't go unnoticed by TNA management, and she was given more and more to do. She wrestled in a Queen of the Cage match at Lockdown 2009 against ODB and Sojo Bolt, and at Sacrifice she was beaten by Taylor Wilde in a Monsters Ball match. Daffney was getting booked in more and more extreme matches and risky situations. She suffered a massive concussion after being chokeslammed through a barbed wire board by Abyss. Then 6 months later, she was seriously injured by the inexperienced Rosie Lotterlove. This caused her another concussion, a bruised sternum and a neck injury. But that's not all. She received yet another concussion after Tara smashed her in the head with a toolbox. And so Shannon launched a lawsuit against the company, and around the same time, TNA decided to not renew her contract. On her social media, she wrote, "Yesterday my picture was taken down off of the TNA roster page. My contract expires today and TNA did not renew it. I do not know if it has anything to do with it, but I filed a workers' comp claim against them for injuries I've sustained in the ring, and my lawyers said to not go into any more details." Word started to get around about TNA's working conditions backstage, about performers being pressured into performing dangerous stunts by TNA staff members like Terry Taylor. Shannon had been reluctant to do that table spot that caused the first concussion, but apparently she did it under pressure. Afterwards, she was rushed to the emergency room and allegedly left with a huge hospital bill that TNA refused to pay for. When Rosie Lotterlove badly injured Shannon with another concussion, TNA used that footage of the injury to try and get her over as a monster heel, which was just completely disgusting and disrespectful. Eventually, Shannon settled out of court. Afterwards, she went onto Twitter to say, "I'd like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all the love and support over the past 2 years. I appreciate so much that you recognise the huge injustice that is being done to professional wrestlers throughout the industry. I hope my case has opened up a few eyes, and maybe now we, the wrestlers who put our bodies on the line every time we step into the ring, are one step closer to being provided with medical coverage and all the benefits that go along with being a true employee and not an independent contractor." After retirement, she still appeared for various indie promotions as a manager, but those injuries changed Shannon's life, and so her physical and mental health started to deteriorate. She had neck surgery to fuse her C5 and C6 vertebrae. She saw the operation as a rite of passage that many wrestlers have to go through, and it gave her some temporary relief. But for Shannon, it was the 3 concussions that affected her most seriously. She advocated for better protection for wrestlers and gave advice on how to take care after getting head injuries. She also often spoke about how she struggled to navigate daily life. She had to avoid bright daylight and the constant headaches that she suffered from. Towards the end of her life, Shannon became convinced that she was suffering from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE for short. This condition can lead to symptoms like memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, impulse control problems, aggression, depression, anxiety, suicidality, and eventually progressive dementia. In the days before Shannon committed suicide, she posted videos on Instagram. The most important thing to remember is that CTE and head injuries and concussions, they can now really only be diagnosed after you are dead. So I don't want to do anything to hurt my brain. I want to be studied. I want the future generations to know. Don't do stupid shit like me. Remember, my brain goes to Boston. In later Instagram posts, she seemed in more distress as she spoke about feeling alone and in pain. In one post, she was seen with a gun in the frame. The video went viral and it prompted an outpouring of support, but tragically, she was found dead in her home in September 2021. Shannon Spruill was a unique and talented performer who had a genuine love for wrestling. And in the end, it was the wrestling industry that let her down. Her death should be yet another reminder that those in power in the wrestling industry should prioritise the well-being of their performers rather than ignoring and overlooking them.